Hello, everybody. It's Fernando Labastida with another interview in the speaker preview series for the UXAI conference in Waco, Texas, all day, September 12th at the Waco Performing Arts Community Center. We're happy to have Russ Henneberry here today. Russ hails from St. Louis. He is the founder and CEO of The Click. It's the click.ai. It's maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a learning community to help people use advanced AI moves, set up their own projects, automate their marketing, create websites, even apps, etc. And Russ, just to give you a little background, he was the head of product and editorial for digitalmarketer.com, who you probably know from the Ryan Dice, the head of Digital Marketer. So Russ was actually instrumental in coming up with some of the big messaging points that Digital Marketer used. So welcome, Russ. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for agreeing to be a speaker.
Always great to talk to you, Fernando.
Great. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on and kind of like what the topic of your talk. You're going to be the closing keynote at the summit. And you're going to talk about really the core essence of what the summit's all about, right? Keeping your voice and using AI to really amplify what is your unique DNA, your unique differentiator, your point of view. But tell us a little bit about, first of all, the click, and then how that kind of translates into what you're going to talk about in your keynote.
The Click, I do consulting work and other things, but the Click is my community and you're a part of it. There's a bunch of awesome people in there. We're all playing around with AI. We're at the front end of this huge transformation. So there's a lot of testing we're doing. There's a lot of, hey, check this out. Look at what we're doing here. This is what I built here. I love that group because it gives me insight into so many different use cases, like different businesses that are using AI. And we're interested in not the coding side of AI necessarily, even though that comes in a little bit, but we're really more interested in the intersection of business and AI, and particularly marketing and sales and AI. And that's the whole key here. I love what you're talking about at this conference because it's a huge problem, right? If you don't structure your AI properly, the AI will literally take over your brand. It'll take over your voice. It'll start, whether you realize it or not, it'll start to guide what you're working on. And you might find without a properly structured AI and a properly structured mindset around AI, you've given away a lot of your agency in your business or maybe even in your life to AI. A lot of what I want to talk about is how to properly structure an AI so that it's actually amplifying what you're about and what you do and what you want to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And it goes into, what Naval Ravikant, like the famous Silicon Valley investor and thought leader, he talks about how your big differentiator, your product is you. He's been around Silicon Valley for a while, and he's seen thousands of startups from the Silicon Valley come up, and they have this differentiator or that differentiator, but kind of like almost all the things that differentiate a company are gone. Everything is now a commodity, and so the one thing left is you. You're the product, and I think it's so important. But what you're talking about, Russ, is how you cannot let the AI take over who you are, but yet let who you are shine.
And that's a lot of that. When you get to the technical side of that, it's about keeping your AI aware of what it is. Who are you and what is your brand? And that's a lot of that is somewhat technical in terms of not in the way of saying it's complex to set up, but that there's certain information that if you feed your AI properly and it's aware of X and Y and Z, it won't make its own decisions, for example, about something simple like your brand voice and how you want to sound if it's producing written material for you. But even things like what's your mission, what's your values, you can go into design. I have a whole skill that I use with people in the Click to build a design DNA. And it literally just walks through in a wizard and helps you set up the look and feel of how you want things to look and feel. Because if you don't do that and you don't get your preferences out there about what you want design wise, it will decide for you. It will do whatever you ask it to do. Things from, what is the actual DNA of your business, your mission, the kinds of things you want to be putting out to the world. What are your personal values? Feed that stuff to your AI so that it's aware of it. Otherwise, it'll kind of either assume things or make decisions for you. And you're like, may not even realize it, but your AI started taking over what direction you're taking, which I don't think is what any of us really want. We want to be able to ask the AI, help me brainstorm my design DNA or my brand voice, or let's work through my mission statement or whatever. But your agency has to make it in there because you're right. You are the product.
Yeah. So tell us, there's a term that you use a lot when introducing people to these concepts. You use the word boiled chicken versus, could you explain that concept, and then how do you get away from the boiled chicken?
The AI is gonna, again, especially when we first got started with AI, or, you were an early adopter as well. And you remember that, in the early days, like you would ask it to produce something and it wouldn't really know any of the circumstances around it. And the models were not super intelligent. So they were like regressing to the average. But let's say you wanted to write something or create a business plan or whatever, plan a promotion, write an email. Doesn't matter what it is. It would just like regress to like, without any other additional information about what you're trying to do. It would just be like, I'm going to answer your question right now the best of my ability. This is what it's thinking. And it just answers the question. It writes the email, it creates the business plan, whatever, right? If you would add context to it, and that's why you were starting to see these big, long prompts, like you're talking about 2023, people were on LinkedIn. I've got this massive prompt that takes over the whole world. The reason that those prompts worked back then is because they contained a ton of context, right? There was just an enormous amount of information in these big, long 2-page, 3-page prompts that people were giving away. And there was a lot of places in there with little brackets where they'd say, insert your mission here, or insert your brand colors here, or whatever, right? And today, the models have gotten a lot smarter. The models will do things like ask you for context. Like they'll say, I'd love to build your design, or I'd love to build your brand voice, but do you have any information about that? Do you have a sample of your writing? Do you have a screenshot of something that you think is designed well? So the models are getting better at pushing back a little bit and saying, I need more context, basically. I need more information, so that they don't end up giving you boiled chicken and regressing back to the media. But they need you to understand. You need to understand that these tools are only as good as the information that you've provided them. And that the more context you can give them, the better, right? And we could talk about why there's a limit to that in a second, but we could start with the idea that most people that are using AI that are getting started with it for business, most of them are not giving the models enough context. And then the next problem that happens is, if you want to tee this up, because you probably felt it yourself, when you really start to learn AI, your next problem becomes you start to give it too much information, too much context. And then you get a different problem, which I call the drunk uncle problem, which is it gets forgetful, it goes off the rails, right? And that's because it has too much information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I've actually seen that. It's like, sometimes I'll get frustrated with the AI because it says, don't you remember I told you that earlier? And it says, oh yeah, I forgot. Then it gets really apologetic, etc. And
yeah, so there's this Goldilocks quadrant here in terms of what information does that AI have access to. So let's just say, take it for instance, like setting up your design, right? So you want a look and feel, you want it to look a certain way. And so the first problem when you're just getting started with AI is that you'll just give it nothing, right?
Yeah.
So you just start to say, let's build up my design, and it'll try to walk you through it. And at the end, you might be saying, that's not what I wanted, or that looks very average, or whatever. So then you start to learn that it would be good, maybe if I gave it a screenshot of this website that I love, that would help with the context around what I want, and I'll get where I want to go. And then you figure out that does work, right? Oh, if I give it a bunch of information, what if I went and got the CSS file for some website that I love and got the whole CSS file and fed it that? That would be even greater context. It's got all the CSS in there. In other words, the design information is encoded in there. And then you learn that context matters and that adding context. So then you say, I'm going to give it 100 CSS files and 100 screenshots and all the stuff. And so it's going to become this massive design guru, right? But that's when the AI starts to get the other problem, which is that it doesn't know what to refer to. It can't hold all of that at once. And so it gets the second problem, which is that drunk uncle, forgetful. If you've had an AI where all of a sudden its performance just tanks, right? It's going and then it just goes, wow. A lot of times that's just because it's just gotten too much information into its brain and it's, flips out on you.
Exactly. Listen, I wanted to pivot a little bit because I think your community is so awesome in that there is such a wide variety of people that have joined the community and are learning how to apply AI. In this case, you're really focusing on Claude Cowork, an agentic platform to help people automate, speed up their business, do more than they could do normally. And there's two particular examples. There's a lot of marketers in there. There's a lot of people who have online businesses, but there's two in particular that I thought were very interesting case studies. One is a mechanic. He actually has a mechanic shop, and the other is a cleaning company. They actually have people who go to people's houses and clean up. So I was wondering maybe if you could go over some of their case studies and how they're adopting Claude Cowork and other AI to their businesses.
Let's start with Fred. Fred's got a mechanic shop and he's got a pet store in a town in New Jersey. His mechanic shop's 20-something years old. His pet store's a little bit newer. So he has two very different businesses, but also similar in some ways. And so he's built two separate sort of Claude brains for those different businesses. And just like we were talking about earlier, what context does Claude need in order to work on the mechanic shop, right? It needs to know who the customer is. It needs to know all the services that the mechanic shop provides. And all of this can be documented and just placed in, available to Claude. And then on the pet store side, same deal. What is the pet store? What's it called? When was it founded? Who runs it? What do we sell? Handing it a CSV or an Excel file full of all the products that pet store sells and just making that always available to your AI, like persistently available. That is tremendous context, right? That's like tremendous availability to the AI. Your first sort of thought around how to structure an AI should be like, what basic information would I want? If I'm going to work with this AI to try to grow this business, think about hiring a consultant. And let's say you brought that consultant in, they have no idea what you do, nothing. They don't know that you even have a retail store. They just know that they've been called to grow a business. What would you want that consultant to know? If you were going to precede some information to that consultant before they arrive so that you could get the most out of that hour you have with them or 2 hours, what would you want them to know? Well, you would want them to know what you sell, who you sell to, who are the people at the business, like what's our mission statement, like stuff like that. And that's the kind of stuff that we've seen Fred create for his mechanic shop and create for his pet store. And separate, whenever he's working on the pet store, he opens that brain in Claude. And whenever he's working on the mechanic shop, he opens this one. And then, you go beyond these basics where you start to set up inside of that brain different workflows that are very different from the mechanic shop to the pet store. When Fred picks up a new mechanic client, what happens, right? What is the workflow around that? Store goes and looks at inventory and supply chain type stuff, like what is on hand inventory wise, like what do we need to be ordering? He's got different workflows, and we can create instructions in each of these folders as to how those processes work at that company, and Claude can start to assist with that stuff. And so very cool use case where he's got two very different businesses. He's got different people working on those and have access to Claude and able to run different processes, all using a, let's call it AI consultant that is very aware of everything that it needs to know to do a good job running the business. So it doesn't get the boiled chicken, not so much context in there that it becomes the drunk uncle, but just the right amount where he's structured his information that he gives to the AI perfectly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love that case study and his two very different businesses, but that are also, these are physical businesses that you would find on your neighborhood street corner, right?
Yeah, he's always been advanced in marketing and stuff like that. And so I'm sure every mechanic shop in his town is like, who is this guy? Because now he's using AI. And I got to guess that in any small town, there might be, let's say, 3 or 4 mechanic shops. And you got one guy who's mastered AI and the other 3 have not. It's an unfair advantage, you know?
Yeah, exactly. What about the cleaning company?
So Victoria with her cleaning company, and same with Fred, he builds all of his websites with AI where he used to have to pay a lot of money and wait for his web developer to make change. Now he just uses Claude to make changes to his website. So Victoria on the cleaning company side, there's a lot of customer service. And that's primarily as an owner of a cleaning company. The place to start to work with AI is around the interaction with the customer.
Yeah.
And the deliverables that the customer gets and how the communication between the owner of the company and the cleaners, the people that are out doing the cleaning and stuff like that. So there is actually not just one person that owns a cleaning company, but at least 4 people in that community that run a cleaning company. And they are building these amazing applications where, for example, if the cleaning person, the person going to clean a house is running late, they can just log it through this app, like I'm 15 minutes late. And they built all of this themselves. They're not developers, they're not coders or anything, but they've built these business applications to help run these companies. And so if they get an email from one of their clients and they say, where's my cleaner? And their cleaner's 15 minutes late, so be there in just a minute, right? When the cleaner arrives, they're able to take a photo of rooms and say, this is the before, this is the after. So a lot of very practical uses of AI here. And of course, they've set up their whole brains around what the company does and the things that I mentioned previously. But one of the things that's impressed me so much about what these 4 folks are doing with these apps is that they are taking the most time-intensive part of running one of these companies in so much of it. And not only is that reducing the amount of time they have to spend on those things, but it's increasing customer satisfaction. And so, the clients love it when they can log in and see the before and after pictures, right? And they know if their cleaner's running late or if the cleaner had to cancel or whatever. Like all of that level of communication is all running through very simple, but very impactful apps that they've built just talking to Claude.
That's awesome.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah, that is absolutely crazy. And I think that also goes very nicely. It's almost scary serendipitous what you just said there with, we have this manifesto. The summit, the UXAI summit has this manifesto. And if you go to the youxai.live website, you'll see the manifesto in the menu. And part of that is one of the things that we talk about in the manifesto is, look, for years and years now, for the past 10, 20, 25 years, if you wanted to become rich with building applications or software, you had to get an engineering degree from Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, get in with the old boys club at the Sand Hill Road, Silicon Valley VC firms, get into some of those things. And then you had to after you had the right pedigree, then you released an app, et cetera. But now anybody from that small town in New Jersey to Waco to Asheville, St. Louis, Corpus Christi, et cetera, can create these super powerful apps that those previously well-funded $100 million Series C invested companies could do, but they don't have to go to Silicon Valley anymore. They don't have to go to the Silicon Valley in New York or come to Austin They could stay wherever they are and come up with things that are just practical, right? Because we're all craving something that's practical, right? We don't need another Instagram or another TikTok or some social platform that's going to absorb our attention and make our attention spans short. Sorry, I'm getting on a soapbox here. It was just so inspirational, these 4 examples that you told me about. And I think that's going to go really well to what the community in Waco is just kind of craving from all this.
Yeah. It starts with a basic understanding of how AI works. And once you get that, I think you almost find yourself, you know, stumbling into these kinds of use cases. People call it vibe whatever. So vibe coding, vibe marketing, vibe
Designing.
selling.
Yeah.
So you don't know. It's interesting because you're working with an intelligence and you're working through something. You don't necessarily know where it's headed. This goes back to your conversation about your agency here, right? And again, if you just tell the AI, I want to start working on X, and you don't keep inserting your own agency as to how you want that to work, it will build you a solution and you may not be happy with it. But so this whole idea of vibing towards something is very powerful. I've felt it so many times. You just make sure that while you're doing it, you're inserting your own preferences, your own ideas as to what you want, which direction you want to go. Because the AIs are becoming less sycophantic. In other words, early AIs the big joke was, and kind of still is, that no matter what your idea is, it loves it, right? It's, oh, great idea. But we are seeing that the AI models are getting a little bit less like that, where they're like, let me challenge you on that. Let me push back on you on that. And that's a good thing, I think, right? Where we don't just tell it a really flawed idea and it doesn't surface any of those flaws. But we have to be careful that we don't lose our agency, right? That we don't let the AI tell us what the way something should go and the thing that we want to build. And if you can get clear on what it is, what's the end outcome that you want, you can build, I'll not say anything, but you can build a lot of things that you could never have built before, just by continuously pushing on your AI to build this, build that, right? It's really fun.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Listen, Russ, this has been an exhilarating conversation. Wish we had time for more, but I think people will find out more when they come and see you give your talk. You're going to be flying down from St. Louis to whether it's Dallas or Austin, I'm not sure. And then, yeah, it'll be great. So, by the way, in the interim, where can people find you, find out about the Click, etc.?
Social media wise, I'm always on LinkedIn. So it's Russ Henneberry. And my website is theclick.ai. You can learn more about the community there. There's a lot of free stuff there as well. You can click up there in the resources tab. There's tons of free training and stuff up there. So I try to be really generous with that. I want everybody to have access to this kind of stuff. And that's why the Click's super cheap. It's not expensive at all. And there's a ton of free training available on the website too.
All right, man. See you then. See you on the 12th. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode of the speaker preview series for the UXAI Summit. See you then.